All right, we're recording.
All right, what we're doing right now is we're having our weekly team meeting, and of course we're implementing technology and social distancing by all of us being together. And we've just had an hour and 15-minute conversation about the state of our industry, and broadly, we as a team have decided that what we want to do is get the message out to people who are interested in and feeling vulnerable about their home values and what the market's doing as it relates specifically to real estate. Obviously, that's what we do. But we just want to get information out because the phone is ringing and people are concerned. So I think it might be good to just start with a quick conversation between us all about, what's the state of our market right now in this very vulnerable, critical, dangerous moment. I think what we're all experiencing, which is sort of strange, is that there's sort of this effort or desire to continue, but there's also this other influence, which is that we have to be so safe and responsible and careful as a society right now about how we behave in the world. So we're trying to find our path right now. What are your experiences so far, everyone?
Well, I think right now, a lot of people are kind of in a phase of this is affecting my life for a few weeks. This is affecting my life this month. And I think there's a lot of unease around the idea that this may actually affect the trajectory of life. I mean, someone might not buy a house for 1.5 years or 2 years or whatever, or they might lose their job because they work for a restaurant or whatever it might be. And so I think right now there's just a lot of kind of grappling with that and what that means for a home purchase, which is one of the biggest things you can do in your life, really.
Right. And I think the big issue there is that the word of the day is recession.
Right. And I mean, it might be depression. I mean, I hate to use that word, but it might be. And none of us has experienced that. And people that are 45 years old buying a house have not experienced that. So it's a lot of turmoil.
We've all been talking about recession potentially coming, and ironically in 2020 was
right.
thing, and we all sort of thought, oh well, that's not going to happen now because the economy is coming along, and then this virus obviously comes along. And what's so shocking is the whiplash of recession just kind of coming in overnight. Like, it just hit us really hard. And Eric, you were asking a question a minute ago about would you articulate what you were saying a second ago about buyers and your concern about how do you approach this from a buyer perspective versus a seller perspective? What were you saying?
Yeah, I think it's from kind of looking from both perspectives. There's a lot of uncertainty about, what they should do and how to price a home, how much they should pay for a home. And, when you look at sort of the perspectives and the personas they're really coming from, is this the right time? And, I don't think there's obviously one clear answer to that. I think it's on a person to person basis, dependent on, what they're looking for. And so the question is, what can I do in the times of uncertainty? Like what if as a buyer, is this a good time to buy? And I think that was one of the key questions I kept getting asked this past weekend.
Well, we certainly have a lot of information based on the last week because we've done several sales, David, right?
Yeah.
And there's been some aggressive offers being made on our properties, record prices in several neighborhoods in the last 10 days.
In the last 10 days, but the market also shifted on Monday. Monday was a big day. I mean, like what the stock market did, and this is the first week that we're getting a fairly sizable amount of people saying, I'm not writing an offer because I'm now worried about the virus. So
it feels like everything changed on at midnight last night. Everything changed.
Everything shifted, but up until, and then we have this house that's taking offers today that has 35 disclosure packets out, and right now I knew of 6 offers coming in. Another offer just came in. A 7th offer just came in. So so there is still this need for housing and for shelter and whatnot. So, whether or not, going back to your question, Eric, is this a good time to buy? On some levels, yes, and on some levels, no. It's a good time to buy because interest rates are fairly low. If you need shelter, it's a good long-term investment. Prices are probably going to start to soften. I don't know how much, though. I mean, that question hinges on, does Israel or Germany announce that they have cracked a virus, in which case we might see a pretty sharp recovery, sharper than we're used to. I mean, that's the thing about our society right now, is things shift quickly. Everything's at warp speed. And the one thing that we know about Bay Area real estate is that it doesn't, when things soften, it doesn't soften as much. And B, when things recover, it recovers fast.
Exactly. And
So,
supply and demand component drives our industry more than anything, right?
Right.
And people need homes in bull markets and bear markets, right? I mean, that's the beauty of residential real estate. I mean, we need a roof over our heads.
Yeah,
People
and
need
trying
habitation.
to time markets can be dangerous. I mean, there's all sorts of stories about people who said, oh, the market's going down, and they were wrong, and it flipped right back up, or whatever. It's tricky. But it's hard to know. It's hard to know.
I remember, David, our first home we bought in Alameda together, and we fell in love with this house on Santa Clara Avenue on the West End. And, you know, we started to look at the purchase as an investment, and we started to run numbers, and we started to get all crazy about was it a good time? Was it a bad time? The market was increasing. It was going to increase for another 5 years. We didn't know it at that time. And our real estate agent at the time looked at us and said, are you buying an investment or are you buying a home? And it was such an enlightening moment for me, because I was buying a home, and it forced me to stop looking at it as an investment. It was a great investment over time, as most real estate always is in the Bay Area. Yeah. And it gave me permission to buy the house. You know, whether the market went up or down, it really didn't make any difference at that point, because we needed a house to live in to raise our family.
Yeah, I think the harder conversation right now is what's happening with sellers. I think sellers are feeling they're feeling whiplash right now, because it's been a seller's market for so very long, and they really felt very emboldened going into this market. We have several sellers that are, you know, poised to go on the market at this very unfortunate moment in our history, and they feel
super vulnerable.
They feel super vulnerable. They're at sea right now. So we're doing everything we can to get them all the information at our disposal around what agents are saying and what we're experiencing, and, you know, how it's going to be affected that our photographers can't go out to their house right now. And the you know, we're all figuring this out one day at a time. We were on the phone yesterday trying to figure out which title companies were open, and if the county recorder is going to stay open, and how we're going to do appraisals, how we're going to get notaries. We've shut down open houses. That's very clear in this shelter at home mandate. But it's, you know, we're just gathering all the information we have, and most importantly for sellers, what we're doing now, and I want to hear all your perspectives on this, is we have to change all the rules. We have to adapt to the times. We have to know that maybe pricing low no longer is the path. Maybe it's about transparent pricing now. Maybe it's about not being so concerned about staging and the emotion it drives, because people are going to be making more pragmatic decisions now than they are making emotional ones. And every house is different. Every house has a different buyer pool, has a different set of inspection findings, is likely to resonate with a buyer pool psychologically in different ways. We have to take this all very case by case and be as better and smarter than we've ever been before. What sort of experiences are you all having? I'm talking too much.
Well, on the flip side of what you just said, there's a house across the street from me that's coming soon. And I thought it was perfect for clients of mine, and they saw it just before all of this started. And now—
What neighborhood are you talking about, Rachel?
I'm sorry?
What neighborhood are you talking about?
In Montclair.
Okay.
And they decided that they didn't want to do it, but it was an incredible opportunity because they were the only people that saw the house.
Right.
And now the seller, it's basically half staged. It's sitting there. The seller doesn't live in it anymore. And I don't know what the listing agent is going to do. I mean, I haven't asked her, but you know, there are opportunities like that that are cropping up for buyers as well, if you're kind of attuned. So it's definitely very interesting.
Yeah, and that's a moment to call the listing agents. I mean, I've got sellers who are very likely are poised to just rent the place out. They don't need to sell, and they feel too vulnerable. And if the buyer pool gets too aggressive or too opportunistic, they're gonna pivot and do something else.
And I mean, there's an interesting thing with just the recession piece of this, which is that you know, the Fed can adjust for, they can create more demand, but they can't create more supply.
Right.
And that's kind of what's happening across the board. And I think it's going to happen in real estate as well, because people are going to not want to sell for whatever reason. And so there may be credit flowing, there may be good interest rates, but that may not necessarily translate.
That is the most powerful tool for the sellers right now is low inventory and housing crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
Those-
think it's
those
just going to
two
get more
factors-
intense.
Those two factors may make sellers do a lot better in this equation than they may be feeling at this moment.
Yeah, I'm in escrow on a property with a first-time home buyer in Alameda, kind of center of the island, just for reference sake. And we did get into contract with an inspection contingency only because they didn't have a full inspection contingent or a packet ready up front. But with the news of this pending 3-week quarantine that we're all sitting in currently right now, that changed their attitude really fast. And so now we're talking about, well, if we ran over the budget for the renovation on this house by 10%, they weren't worried about that at the time, which was literally last week. And now we're like very focused on those budget numbers, the timeline, how long it's going to take for them to do what it is they want to do and move their family of 5 in there, 3 kids under 6, because another 3-4 weeks is another month of holding cost, which is, probably a net of $6,000 or $7,000 to them, not to mention any budget overruns. It like totally changes their economic model. So to the point of the investment standpoint, like the numbers are still real to people, especially when income is a little uncertain. And I think, we've been very fortunate to see huge job growth in our area, constantly seeing people moving in and taking the jobs, very low unemployment, and obviously low interest rates has led to a lot of people needing a very limited number of houses. But going forward, they are very seriously looking at their numbers and making sure that they can sort of wrap their heads around this logically. I think in the long run, they'll still have a really great investment because they're getting the house at a fantastic price because it's not fixed up. But, they still have to be able to take some short-term roller coaster ride on this one, and step into a little bit of uncertainty, but controlling that as much as we can, like pushing that bracket in as tight as humanly possible is what we're doing right now. And I feel confident we're still going to be able to make it happen. But that changed across my buyer pool right now, that changed very drastically yesterday.
Yep.
And being on the selling side of that home with a contingency in place with a physical inspection is a daunting endeavor for the seller, right? Because until that contingency is removed, they are not in a safe deal, and they are positioned for a negotiation probably more than they would have been 4 weeks ago, right? So
I mean, the theme here is recession brings conservatism. Like everyone's psychology is shifting right now, and we have to, and in those moments it becomes a little harder sometimes for people to transact. Sometimes sellers are hanging on to the past, and buyers are projecting into the future, and there's just this chasm that arrives between them. So we have to find those conversations where we can find those common grounds, as win-win situations, or else people will just sort of go into their corners for a while while this all works.
And
I think the big challenge for me, just for those of us that haven't been through a cycle like this, is how right now things are shifting so quickly that it's hard to know where that middle ground is. I mean, if a house went on the market a week ago, what now is an acceptable offer, or what, it's just hard to navigate because it's shifting by the hour.
That's part of why we're going to have these conversations on a daily level. We need to adapt to changes in real time. I was talking to somebody who works at Cal Berkeley who was saying who said to me ironically that his whole team in his department were making plans, and then they all got blown up, and then they made other plans and those got blown up. So we're all going to have to be more nimble than we've ever been in our lives, in our careers.
But this is
And
one of the things that we talk about all the time, right? as we're having conversations, and we talk about every moment needs to have a strategic element in play in real estate, right? From the beginning of a transaction to the end of the transaction. And that's what we do. I mean, we bring strategy to every moment, and the moments are changing, and what might be appropriate today is going to be very different in 3 hours.
Well, that's the thing. That brings up the topic that I think is most interesting. I personally find most interesting right now, which is that we're under this shelter in place order, and we have these sellers who are feeling intensely vulnerable. I think immediately of this one particular seller who is, it's a couple. The husband feels like his job is not secure. The wife doesn't make as much money I don't think they could live off of her salary entirely. There's a high risk pregnancy in place. They really want to get this house sold. And are private showings happening? Is it irresponsible for us to take people into other people's homes? Is it responsible for us to take people into vacant homes? Is it responsible for us to be out in the world? Like, it's a really hard moment to understand the ethics of how to take care of people, how to take care of buyers who need homes and sellers who need to sell homes, and of course, stay safe and within the boundaries of this mandate. What are people's thoughts on that?
I also think people just have radically different needs. I mean, this couple you're referring to, they just need to sell this house, presumably. And then there are other people who are very caught up in, you know, am I going to make $50,000 more or $50,000 less or whatever? And so it's also just being in touch with the nuances for each seller, I would think.
And relative to our licenses and our fiduciary responsibility to our clients, like, you know, when we sign a listing agreement or a buyer brokerage agreement with a client to represent them, you know, we on a very core level accept responsibility to act in their best interest above our own. And we are, as we talk about all the time in this team, advisors, not deciders. Like, we can only give you the best information and then execute what you've asked us to do. And then there is, of course, a moral line that everyone will have to decide on relative to showing, or, you know, obviously open houses are out of the question at the moment, but showing versus, you know, not. And, you know, trying to get, some photography taken for people to at least get some exposure on the house that they absolutely must sell because of the pregnancy and the job situation. Like, where, you know, I think this is where that trust, that experience, that fiduciary responsibility is going to come into play even more so. And I think being awake at the wheel, having these conversations, engaging with clients and asking, you know, what is really at the core of this transaction is going to be absolutely critical, because there's no other way to go.
I agree. I think, you know, the charges, you know, we need to approach everything with cooperation with one another, you know, sellers and buyers. You know, we need to really be looking out for everyone in this moment, right? And not taking advantage of anyone.
That's the best part of a moment like this. Right. Like, I've reached out to 2 different sellers, 2 different agents who had sold the listings we have previously. It's a simple thing, but I asked them if I could use their photographs because I can't get a photographer out. And they were like, of course. And that is something that is normally verboten in our business. Like, we never, there's all sorts of licensing and proprietary stuff around photography, but it's a simple gesture to help, you know, your fellow man get your fellow human get through this. So it's just, that's the best part of it.
And there are ways to go out in the world responsibly. I mean, going out in the world isn't an irresponsible act if you're, you know, adhering to, you know, the necessary precautions, and we will all learn how to do that and get the job done. Right? Ultimately.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to have these conversations with one another, probably every 2 to 3 days. And I think we're going to record them because we're hoping that there's some valuable information for the consumer out there who is looking for answers and data and anecdotes. So we're going to put them out there, and hopefully they're useful in some way. And does anyone else have anything else they want to say right now?
I guess if anybody has any questions or wants us to address a certain discussion, please reach out to us and we'll have that discussion with one another.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're in new
Yeah.
territory together, and we'll figure it out as we move through it.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far in the video, drop some comments and questions. We'll read those, we'll respond to those, or send us direct messages, because that's we're at home. We're we're responding to what's going on. And I would just follow up with Gary Keller, our CEO of Keller Williams, sent out an email yesterday, to all the agents, all whatever 150,000 of us there are, and said, one thing that really struck me, which was when you look at the number of transactions that occurred, like number of sides, meaning a buy or a sell, that happened in 2011, which was, as we all know, a very tumultuous time in the real estate industry, versus 2019, they were very similar. And so there is still activity happening. There's still things that are people are going to buy, people are going to sell. It's the way that we do that is going to change. And, obviously today is totally different than it was yesterday. So let's all focus on how we change together and what that all means for us going forward.
Check in with us
Absolutely.
Thursday. We may have a whole new world we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think we should post that letter because it had great information in it relative to this changing market and this moment of flux in our world.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
All right. Thank you guys. Stay well.